The one drawer at the condo I knew held everything we needed to get frosty. Zip parked a few blocks away and crept to the outside of the main wall that surrounded the rehab's courtyard where we waited. It was a still and quiet night, the light from a full moon casting long shadows from the trees across the 8 feet of stucco and brick that blocked Zip from our view. Fucking Jeff was on the phone whispering directions back and forth with Zip on the other end. My job was to keep an eye out for any movement from the TV lounge and lobby that sat behind the glass doors next to our location, the smoking table caked in the shit of 1,000 seagulls. I watched as a giant hand rose up into view just above the top of the wall as Zip listened from the street side for FJ's specific guidance to the prime spot for launch. Okay, left, a little more. That's too far. Go back right. There it is. More, half a step more, and stop. The giant hand stopped. Okay, my man, toss it. The bungee-wrapped, plastic Save-On Drugs bag came scream-skittering through that peaceful night air like a wailing newborn vampire on the back of a rattlesnake piñata. It was insane. That thing hit the deck like a dying rocket and found the only patch of wet dirt near our feet from a drizzle the day before. It was like a mud grenade had exploded in our faces. Table shit wasn't enough. Mud was clearly missing. The gods were letting their presence be known. Fucking Jeff scooped it out of the muck and quickly hid the dripping sack under his sweatshirt, whispering bullseye to Zip before he flipped his secret tiny phone in half and hung up. I kept my eyes on the building behind us. Not a creature had stirred, not even a lab rat. Unless we were on camera from a military satellite, the coast was clear for Phase 2 of Operation Crack Slop to get underway. Freckled in brown grime, I forced my zest toward calm as I made it back to my room, unobserved by any of the staff. I tore off my shirt and dumped it in the shower, trying to keep clues from becoming evidence. My stomach was alive with giddy anticipation, knowing my favorite drug was moments away from rejuvenating every cell I owned. With an ankle monitor and a guaranteed year hanging over me, I still viewed my reckless choices that night as a return to freedom. My temp was approaching 105. Rehab fever is a motherfucker. FJ had taken the Save-On bag to his quarters at the other end of the hall to sort through Zip's imported goodies. Given how quickly the plan had taken flight, I wasn't expecting Virgo perfection from Zip's end, but I did have faith he'd followed FJ's flip-phoned instructions and grabbed the 3 amigos. Dope, pipe, torch. Within minutes, fucking Jeff scurried back down the hall and slipped into my room to share the night's first hiccup. Zip had supplied us with a fat bag of rock and 2 lighters, but only 1 pipe. We'd have to take turns and treat the pipe like a baton, with the bright hallway as our double-dealing 37-meter relay. I told FJ it was too risky and for him to go first, that I'd go second, and he could hang on to the pipe after that. We both agreed that made the most sense, and if the night stayed as planned, Zip coming back with a second pipe wasn't out of the question. FJ followed the new plan and returned shortly to make the handoff and activate my turn. Finally. Not sure how much that dude smoked in the brief time he was gone, but holy hell, man. His face was a red not found in nature, and his eyes looked like he had them in backwards. He was obviously locked up and didn't say a word, because he couldn't. As though his hands were filled with jumping beans, he gave me the hot pipe, and back to his room he headed. Fucking Jeff was revealing himself to be a complete bust. With the clock ticking toward imminent disaster, I needed the only hit I'd have time for to land at the very bottom of me and stay there. A torch snapped, a rock crackled. Thor's hammer swung down into the center of my chest. The weightless starburst was as promised, but so was fucking Jeff's ambush. The hallway was suddenly filled with activity and loud voices. I could hear all of it from inside the liquid church bells that had swallowed my face. My ceiling had transformed into a swirling montage of comic book animals I'd never seen before. I stayed up all night watching them, studying them, waiting for the knocks on my door that never came. The following morning, our entire wing was abuzz with chatter and stress. Word was out that a couple patients had gotten high on the premises the night before, and while they did nail one of them, the alleged accomplice was still on the loose. To spread the shakedown further, all clients were going to be questioned and then tested. When they put the squeeze on Jeff, that guy didn't mention 1 letter of my name. In a blink, fucking Jeff had become good old Jeff again. Like-minded dudes in a rehab honor the dope code as well. I knew exactly what I had to do. I just wasn't sure yet what the how looked like. The fedora I spoke of wasn't symbolic. The one I had with me, a Dick Tracy model I'd bought at the airport, was an artifact from J5's maiden night together when we declared ourselves Las Vegas style. In addition to the pipe, Jeff had left me with a few rocks and one of the lighters right before our night imploded. When I bought that silly hat, I never imagined I'd be using the sweatband inside the crown to conceal my dope stash. I put it on and checked myself in the mirror. Dick Tracy himself would have been proud, then would have hauled me in. Shortly before the group drug testing was set to commence, I found myself in the office of a lady named Betty who ran the joint. From the Small World files, Betty's brother was Brad, the author of the warm jacuzzi jet opioid analogy. Her no-nonsense Lieutenant Lori was seated next to her. Before they had a chance to speak, me. Okay, here's the deal. I'm the missing piece in the Jeff puzzle, so please spare all the other folks the suspicion and hassle of the drug test. Also, I will have an envelope with 20 grand cash delivered within the hour to split between you if I can have your word you'll make the relapse go away. If for some reason that doesn't work for either of you, I'm gonna leave through that window behind me and take my fucking chances on the streets. No one said a word. The silence was not cool, and I think they knew that. Finally, Lori. Take it easy, tough guy. No one's taking bribes and no one's jumping out of windows. Me. Oh, all right. So then how do we fix this? Betty, we need to know if there's any more drugs floating around, and if that's the case, for the safety of the other residents, we need them turned over to us. That wasn't just my cue, it was Detective Tracy's as well. I made a small show of removing the yellow fedora from my model locks, extracted the items, and handed over the hidden stash. Lori, well, there's a first. Impressive, and thank you. Me, don't mention it. Betty, two things, Charles. We are sympathetic to your situation and know for a fact that jail is not the answer to your problems. Me. Okay, wow, good to know. Thank you, a lot. What's the second thing? Betty. Are you sick? Me. I mean, yeah, that's kind of why I'm here, right? But as far as sick? No, not that I'm aware of. Why do you ask? Lori produced the muddy Savon bag from beneath her desk. It was inside a larger, clear plastic bag that she set on the table between us. Lori. Forgetting about the 3 or 4 random Vicodin for one sec, or the cocaine dust on everything, we really need to know why you had 77 pills of the antibiotic Keflex smuggled into a rehab. We all went back to the staring thing. That was a really good question. For Zip. I'd caught a huge break. They assured me that Operation Crack Slop would never find its way anywhere near the court's purview. The machine was going to live to see another day and not have to strain that view through the bars of a jail cell. There was one catch, though. Whether or not I was allowed to stay in the marina didn't rest solely in the hands of those two amazing women. They had a boss, Dr. Something-Face, and he was on a power trip by not revealing my fate until the following day. It was complicated only in the hands of those two amazing women. They had a boss, Dr. Something-Face, and he was on a power trip by not revealing my fate until the following day. It was complicated. If his ultimate decision was to banish me, I'd need my lawyer to craft a cover story for having to leave that was so bulletproof Judge Myra couldn't disassemble it. Myra was the same man who dealt with Robert Downey Jr. a few years earlier, and it was a pretty safe bet any sleight of hand we came up with had already been exhausted by Bobby DJ. On the walk back to my room, I passed Large Eric in the hallway and a huge grin took over his face. Dude, I'm looking to score some antibiotics. You know anyone? He asked and laughed his way down the hall. I called back to him, just your mom. Is that thing on her butt gone yet? He laughed again, his middle finger the size of Zip's up and at me as he disappeared from view. It turned out the drawer at the condo I'd sent Zip into wasn't just my illicit holdings, but also a dumping ground for all things RX I'd been amassing and hoarding. Can't blame him for wanting to be as thorough as possible. Kinda surprised there wasn't a size 6 Manolo in that dope bag as well. He began my journey at the Delray rehab with a nomadic fake hand and ended it with a Keflex kilo shot out of a mud cannon. The Zip was one of a kind, and the kind of one I'm honored to have known. The final vote was unanimous, 1-0. Dr. Donkeyface wielded his veto power and sent me packing. Betty called promises and they agreed to take me back. As far as the story for the judge was concerned, Lori and Betty devised the perfect ruse. Their psychiatric care at the marina didn't cover the full breadth of my pathologies. Any attempts by the court to prove otherwise could not penetrate the iron dome of my HIPAA rights. My favorite detail in that mix was the fact that I didn't spend even one living second with the psychiatrist at the Marina rehab. Why would I need one? I had fucking Jeff. The head guy at Promises met me on the lawn when I stepped out of the car. He spent a good 7 minutes delivering his rehearsed speech about last chances in jail and death and so on. I went full earnest guy and took it all in, nodded when it mattered, earnested more when it mattered more. He asked if I had any questions, and I told him I only had one. Any chance I can watch Game 6, Bulls-Jazz, a bit later on today? He gave me permission to do so and would mention in an interview years later to some lame treatment publication how inspired he was to see a spark in me that still cared about real shit taking place in the world. He could see it however he chose. I had 20 grand on the Bulls and didn't want to miss the game. It was the same 20 dimes Betty and Lori didn't accept. As we all know, MJ hit the shot. It was a real moment for me. I needed to hang on to that moment, get inside of it, and stay there. I'd been tossing up air balls for far too long. I decided that same day, June 14, 1998, it was time for me to start making a few big shots of my own. Chapter 39. I spent a total of 9 months at Promises, 6 of them as an inpatient, and the other 3 in their outpatient program, a hybrid form of re-entry into life while still logging several hours a day at the rehab. The facility had its own Jeff, a solid dude named Bill J., whom I bonded with as my roommate. It was his 20th time in treatment, and from the many scars his stories revealed, he was no doubt a fire starter. Given the right fuel, Bill was one match away from becoming fucking Bill. Whenever he got that look, I did my best to hide the gas cans. As tempting as it was to wingman his escapades, I refused to betray the new lease I'd wrestled from the jaws of the Marina debacle. My rules for myself at Promises were entirely different from the Marina, in that I actually had a few. Their rules stated that I wasn't allowed to leave the Promises premises for almost the entire first third of my term. Might have had something to do with that 1 a.m. stroll to PCH in my pajamas 2 weeks earlier that had them on cautious alert. Once I'd regained everyone's trust, from the counselors to the judge, that leash began to loosen, both figuratively and literally. Had a few. Their rules stated that I wasn't allowed to leave the Promises premises for almost the entire first third of my term. Might have had something to do with that 1 a.m. stroll to PCH in my pajamas 2 weeks earlier that had them on cautious alert. Once I'd regained everyone's trust, from the counselors to the judge, that leash began to loosen, both figuratively and literally. 1 month after Jordan hit the shot, they finally agreed to pardon my ankle and remove that fucking LoJack. It was complete overkill, but I guess every show trial has to have 1 or 2 special effects. I was grateful for the extra slack and used most of my day passes to pass the time with America's favorite pastime. Reconnecting with one of my first loves in this life genuinely became the only therapy I was responding to. The omni-staunch Tony T, along with a dude we called Kenny Meds, who has the best BP arm on the planet, were on time like the Navy to join me on those magical outings. Medlock used to say it was our day to be 10 again. When anyone at the rehab asked me where I was going on those days, I'd always reply, church. Ken threw perfect strikes, my bat unloaded some rage. Tony kept us laughing. Something in me had shifted, and as the days became months, that shift demanded it be nurtured into sharper focus. I'd been defining myself for way too long by the smoldering wreckage of my severe choices. I wore them like a badge, daring others to outdo my stupid while caring only about shock value and spectacle. If a disaster inspired more holy fucks from my crew than the last, the pile-up was a win, an early form of likes, as it were. The light that had once blinded me evolved into the sunlight of each new day as it broke through the shame clouds of crack, chaos, sex, and booze. The searing truths I embraced during my stay reunited me with a hope and confidence I no longer sought at the end of a pipe or the bottom of a bottle. To finally realize those virtues had been inside me all along, I just needed the gift of silence. The weather in Toronto was a lot hotter than I was expecting. It was June 14th, 1999, and no, I wasn't going to party like Prince recommended. Consequently, I was going to party like Emilio was expecting. The two of us were in Hogtown together, starring in a movie for Showtime that E was also directing. The film was called Rated X, but ironically, its rating was not. We were portraying the Mitchell brothers, Artie and Jim, two genre-bending porn pioneers. In the 1970s, The brothers ushered a major shift into adult cinema that changed its commerce landscape forever. They replaced film with videotape. Folks old enough to remember the FBI warning on every Blockbuster rental have the Mitchells to thank for it. Their story had never. They replaced film with videotape. Folks old enough to remember the FBI warning on every Blockbuster rental have the Mitchells to thank for it. Their story had never been told cinematically, and we were there to change all of that. During one particular scene, I was well aware that it had been a year to the day since I stood on that lawn at Promises and gave them my own. I'd gone 7 years between sober birthdays, and the Artie Mitchell version would be my first since that Aussie in Cage's fridge took me down under. The milestone involved activities that very few could ever claim during their sober celebration. By day, I was doing fat rails a blow and slamming vodka shots. By night, I was taking a cake at a local AA meeting without telling a single lie. The scenes we shot that day found my character Artie on a bender, snorting powdered lactose and dumping shots of Fiji water down the hatch. It was a fucking trip. For some reason, portraying that behavior didn't get the wheels spinning to dive back in for real. The fact that it wasn't at all how I used to do it kept the crave wolves at bay and my temp at a cool 98.6. Keep in mind I was still on probation and would be for 2 more years, drug testing every week and sometimes randomly. I had a testing set up at a local hospital, and the results were sent back to LA for the 2 months I was on the film. I won't allot too much sober credit to that leash they had me on, but there were a few days during that first year when I was grateful the damn thing was in place. It never reached Code Red status, but the tickle was just enough to know which bird the feather came from. Rated X was my second movie with the new sober brain. The first one, being John Malkovich, was only 2 days and didn't really count. I was driven to work to film my scenes while I was still an inpatient. One odd detail the 2 movies had in common was the special effects hairstyle they both called for. Often described as a monk's fringe, I've pictured it more as those fur head muffs people wear during winter. In all of my previous film work, the monk funk never made its way onto my head. To have it finally happen when it did, and do so in back-to-back roles, was as improbable as that funk showing up there one day for real. The main difference between the 2 fringes was the artistry by which they were applied. Being John Malkovich was a standard bald cap that looked like it was part of a bad SNL sketch. Rated X was an actual shave job with an expertly trimmed receding effect by none other than Brown Dave, a.k.a. David Leroy Anderson. Shortly after Red Dawn, my man had decided to follow in his dad's FX footsteps, and it goes without saying Dave was grateful for Lance's career decision to stop changing light bulbs. When Dave joined us in Toronto to create the monk look, he only had the 1 Oscar from Nutty Professor. Fucking slacker. A few years later, Men in Black landed him his 2nd Academy Award for Best Makeup. I love it when the actual good guys win the big ones. Emilio and I had the best of the best to transform us into those 2 trailblazers of cutting-edge smut. I didn't have any female companionship during the entire shoot of Rated X, and I'm not blaming the sad hair. The schedule was grueling and the work too detailed and demanding to divert my focus by going there. I kept my bald head down and made the job my only priority. In a bit of an experiment, I had the prop department order my prescription and my glasses a few numbers off and wore that pair when my character was hammered in the scene. Drinks were spilled, things got bumped into, migraines awaited me at the end of those days. I didn't care. Pain is temporary. Film remains forever. It also gave me the confidence to go further emotionally and well beyond where I'd normally stop or pull back. Through those blurry specks, I couldn't attach faces to the shapes watching the scene, and therefore it didn't feel like they were staring at me. Sometimes, you gotta hide to be seen. Emilio was thrilled with my work ethic from day one to wrap, and still rates my performance as the best thing I've ever done. I can't weigh in on that, but I am okay saluting a few scenes I'm really proud of. It wasn't until the final night in Toronto that I decided my celibacy streak needed the closure I'd find in the matchmaking yellow pages of Bell Canada. In less than an hour, a gorgeous brunette rolled in to DNDR night into the awe some would frown upon. She was wonderful, but that level of intimacy still housed a frustrating awkwardness that I knew could be cured with substances. I also knew those insane thoughts were a form of sabotage from an alcove in my mind where truth didn't get a vote. The rehab folks did warn me that it would take time for my brain to adjust, but come on, man, it had already been a year. My ongoing debate to appraise the value of booze and dope between the sheets was useless. Multiple choices were down to two: sober sex or no sex at all. Hold on, let's not get carried away here. If I was going to get comfortable with it on those terms, maybe it was time to adjust the partner choice to fit the headspace. It had nothing to do with judgment and everything to do with common sense. Certain behaviors in specific arenas generated predictable outcomes. In other words, as long as I kept wearing hamburger pants on safari, I couldn't complain about being attacked by a lion. In that very hotel room on that exact night, I decided it was time to stop paying for sex. If any of us look back on the moments that defined us or influenced major decisions, they tend to include a foreshadowing detail, either right near the surface or buried deeper for latent discovery. Case in point, I was mid-puff into a post-euphoric cigarette with my Canadian Insta-girlfriend when the young lady reached over and slapped my bare stomach with a room-filling thwack to get my attention. "What do you say, fatso? You up for round two?" Pin drop. Ant yawn. "Wow. Jeez, lady, you had 10,000 nicknames to choose from and you went with that?" I wanted to blow my brains out. It's amazing where one word can send a guy. That one sent me straight to a lipo doctor about a week after I got back to L.A. But yes, I was up for round two. I did my best not to crush her in the process. It's pretty common for a lot of folks to gain a bunch of weight after getting sober, especially when stimulants were their drug of choice. I'd always defend it by telling people I'd rather be a bit soft and alive than crack skinny and fucking dead. I had to shave my entire head before I left Toronto to make sure it all grew back evenly. Emilio opted not to shave his, and when I saw him at the folks' house a few weeks later, the top had grown in just enough to make his head muff look like a punk rock Yorkie. I followed up the gut suck surgery with a meal delivery plan, long before it was the barfy, en vogue, foodie thing to do. Early word on Rated X was strong, with my work being talked about as a proof of talent showcase to reignite interest and trust. I wanted to be fit and focused for whatever opportunities Rated X might generate. I didn't need the film to kick down every door in Hollywood, just leave them ajar enough for me to slip into the room and take it from there. One of those doors opened to a man named Gary David Goldberg, the prolific TV producer and creator of the long-running hit Family Ties, starring Michael J. Fox. Another MJ on my journey. Add that to my first drug, Mary Jane, and I think we got a theme on our hands. By the time I sat down with Gary to discuss his new sitcom pilot, I dropped 25 pounds on the Zone diet and had a full head of hair again. The pilot was called Sugar Hill, an updated homage to Barney Miller, a sitcom I loved as a kid. Long story shorter than if I spoke it, I got the gig, we shot the pilot, it didn't get picked up. I was fucking bummed. Gary told me not to take it too hard and that he had another idea he needed the okay from his partners to approach me with. I really enjoyed Gary. He was genuinely funny and smart in a rough and tumble kind of way, and always spoke his mind like a Pall Mall, unfiltered. A week later, he called to ask me how I'd feel about taking over for the health-compromised Michael J. Fox on the then-current ABC hit sitcom Spin City. Holy resurrection, Batman! I was stunned and thrilled and asked him if I could just have 24 hours to sit with it. He said no problem, but not longer than that. His partners on the project needed to know ASAP. I asked him who those partners might be, and he matter-of-factly told me it was Jeffrey Katzenberg and Steven Spielberg. Oh, just those guys. I took that phone call in a room where I'd almost died 18 months earlier, a room where if you pressed your ear tight enough to the wall, you could still hear the distant echoes of howling anguish. Feeling as alive as I'd felt in ages, I called Gary back from that same room 23 hours later. I told him I'd be honored to step in for Fox and keep Gary's terrific show on the air with our new look Season 5. Gary expressed that he was excited to rejoin the show and shape its new direction with me on board. Not fully sure if I'd heard that correctly, I asked him to please clarify the part about rejoin. Gary explained that he'd been fired from Spin City, the show he fucking created. I didn't want to pry too deep, but I felt it was important to know who specifically had given him the boot. After a long pause, Gary stated, "It was Mike." Chapter 40. When the splashy press release dropped, informing the world I'd be stepping in because Fox had to step away, the headlines were exactly as I'd predicted. America's comedic treasure, the modern-day Mickey Rooney, was being replaced by Boggle, the eater of children. The media had all the exits covered and were gunning for me with both barrels. Every article about Spin's torch pass was steeped in fortune-telling arrogance, with my imminent failure already penned with crystal ball certainty. A few stories even blamed me for the show moving from New York to L.A. with no mention of DreamWorks pulling that trigger. Their sweeping hit piece campaign made it clear right off the bat. The only dissenting voice was going to have to be my own. If I could survive their tarot gauntlet and claw my way to center stage, I'd have the final word under those bright lights. The episodes we started with, to be aired as shows number 2 and number 3, gave me time to warm up before we shot our third episode, my pilot. The first script they sent me, episode 3, was ironically titled Smile, something I wasn't doing as soon as I cracked it open. I was barely to the act break when a familiar foe emerged on the page, letting me know it was still very much in my vicinity. My hero's journey, voice of the people strategy, took a big fat dump in the town square. If Spin was going to be my vehicle to a glorious comeback, Stutterghoul was the bomb wired to the chassis. Saturday at the condo, panic at my disco. Monday's looming network table read sat atop the falls I'd soon be kicked over into the raging waters of sitcom television. A pleasant gentleman had just exited the condo, leaving behind what's known as a fluency device he sold me for $2,000. I had it on my right ear and was staring at it in the mirror, wondering if I'd just been suckered like a chump. The battery-powered gadget looked like a hearing aid from the 60s, oversized and beige, riding the temple like a small plastic banana. The concept behind the speech gizmo I'd just acquired utilized specific vibrations to interrupt a stutter. Any sound in the throat would activate an inner ear buzzing to give the fear word a nudge. The finesse part I had to master was the low-throated to make the thing buzz in the first place. Last thing I needed was to turn day one into the sinus scene from The Odd Couple. I was told after I made the purchase that most people use the contraption at home for a couple of weeks before they felt confident with it out in the world. I had about 40 hours, and there I was, trying to act normal with a giant invisible bumblebee in my fucking skull. I was a goner for sure. The first episode involved a dental theme with the mayor and had no less than 6 or 7 trouble spots in the dialogue. To clarify, a trouble spot is a fear word I'd gotten stuck on in the past. My specific type of stuttering isn't the classic style we've all witnessed at some point, where the same letter is bup like an engine that won't turn over. The card I drew was a lot more subtle, halting that fear word into a locked silence before any sound makes it to the ignition. When that happens in a film setting, it's 1,000 times worse. Everyone on set knows what the word is because they're reading it, waiting for what feels like forever. Another manacle in the whole mystery was how a specific word only needed one event to wind up on the dreaded list. A list that also includes an entire category often overlooked as being words, people's names. A stutterer's vocabulary and friend group can really begin to shrink. My fear-fueled logic would insist that if it had happened that one awful time, it wasn't a risk worth taking anymore. Speech prison is a fucking nightmare. There is no time off for good behavior. There is no clemency. I wish it upon no one, myself most of all. I spent the next 2 days debating if I should call Gary and reveal my syndrome. The fictional stories of stigma and judgment that I clung to kept the phone in its cradle. I was doing exactly what the press had done to me, concluding the unknown. I didn't want to let Gary down. I saw myself as the way back in, for both of us. Monday arrived, and so did I. With a hope that I'd find the missing courage in the 11th hour, the bumble buzzer was ripped off my ear and tossed into the passenger side footwell of my car. Buzzkill had a new definition. I quieted my loud mind, and the message that came back had nothing to do with the fancy therapy of an expensive contraption. I reached a little further inside and balled my fist around the fuck it that I needed to corral Gary and our director Ted W. for a quick chat. They came to my dressing room. I spilled the beans. As uncomfortable as it felt to expose that part of myself, it was equally as liberating. The other side of fear is never the plank we walk to get there. Gary in particular handled it like a sniper who happened to also be driving a tank. The read-through had all of us at 3 long tables they'd pushed together to form a large U. I was surrounded by a dream cast of actors I'd been spending time with over the summer at various press events. Heather Locklear, Alan Ruck, Richard Kind, Michael Bodie Boatman, Barry Bostwick, and the other newcomer, Lana Parrilla, our Latina hotness liaison. After the intros went all the way around the table village, Gary got everyone's attention with a few changes he needed to announce before we began. He explained nothing, just handed out the marching orders. A couple things before we start. On page 4, change New York to Manhattan. Page 16, Heather takes Charlie's line about the delivery guy. Page 31, change Carter's response to boil it, which makes Charlie's line chicken instead of ravioli. On page 40, obviously not verbatim, but the gist is there. On it went until it didn't. We read Smile, and the whole room couldn't stop doing just that. I didn't get stuck on a single word. The roof didn't cave in on top of me. I wasn't fired when it ended. I had another separate chat with our Tom Hertz-led team of writers and brought that group up to speed as well. It's such an overused cliche, but I can honestly say that stealing back my power through surrender opened the door for a feeling of near weightlessness. If that was all it was going to take to remove my biggest fear from the process, there wasn't a whole lot to complain about. In due time, that department would be brimming. In the 4 years prior at Chelsea Piers in New York City, the cast had banked close to 100 episodes together. My sitcom tally was 1, a guest spot on Friends in '96. Stepping into a machine that finely tuned, I sponged as much as I could from my generous co-stars. Most of the credit for the first season going as well as it did, chiefly and rightfully, belongs to them. My new friendship with Boatman was a godsend, as was my history with Alan Ruck. He and I still laughed about Arkansas, Dolly, Creepy Clinton, and the shoes. Heather was familiar as well, but considering we last worked together on Money Talks, my memories of those times were pretty vandalized. The spin Heather was perfectly raunchy and adorable and usually more nervous than I was. I didn't have the party treats she'd dip into to calm those nerves, but good gosh, it was fun as hell to watch when she did. Bostwick was an old pro who had my back in every situation. He'd often say that sitcoms were easy to do, but extremely difficult to do well. One evening after a show, when I was walking to the car with Barry, he dropped some gold on me I still carry to this day. He shared how he never focused on the moments while he was performing them, and it wasn't until the drive home that he was able to reflect on all the little things that felt perfect, the details that filled the quiet ride with purpose and comfort. Before he pulled away in his vintage Benz, I asked him if what he'd just described applied to every show. Barry thought about it for a second, then added a little more gold to the pile. Not when the episode totally sucked. I've said it before that you can't choose your gurus. I guess the real trick is paying attention when they choose you. Chapter 41. September 11th, 2000. It was the early stages of my season 1, and we'd all just settled in for the table read. Can't tell you which episode it was, but I can confirm the Emmys had just taken place the night before. I know this because Mike won Best Actor in a Comedy for season 4, and rumor had it he was already on a plane back to New York. The room got whisper quiet as Gary began to read the screen directions from the cold open in the script. Jarringly, like someone's car had hit the building, the doors crashed open, and in strolled MJF, gripping the shiny Emmy. The whole room broke into a chorus of cheers to salute his victory. I was really happy for him, but at the same time could feel myself shrinking like that last sad balloon at a birthday party. As the roar of the crowd began to subside, Mike walked right over to the table where I was seated and slammed the Emmy down, a foot from my face. "This is for you guys," were the words Senior Fox orated. It was easily in my top 3 moments of awkward McFuckness. I'm not an expert when it comes to spatial science, but we did have tons of it at the front of the room for him to sky pump his golden lady. The trophy slam was a perplexing move that left a sizable dent in my enthusiasm. A few hours later, I came to the decision that I wouldn't wear any of it as a tale of woe, and instead I'd channel those feelings into another layer of armor. I parked my petty emotional bullshit and turned the focus away from the man to the trophy. I saw how spellbound the energy from that thing left everyone and wanted badly to eventually have that same experience. Let's face it, second place gets a box of steak knives. Winners go home with the prom queen. When Mike decided to reprise his role at the beginning of my season 2, he was walking back into a community that had established its own unique rhythm. I'd found my footing and was willing to dance with whoever they put in front of me. The writers willed their skills to another level for their 2 prized veterans. Perfect Sync took notes. A Waltz for the Ages took flight. Mike and I hit that stage together, and my only regret is that we weren't in front of a live audience. I've towed the marks with some of the greats in this business. When it came to laser comedic timing and organic instinct, there was no one better than that brilliant dude with a fucking 3-word name. That guy did things you can't teach and taught things that can't be learned. There were times between setups when we'd have to wait a while for his meds to kick in so he could think and breathe again. I'd have waited all night if I had to. I knew whatever Michael J. Fox was coming back with to finish the job could not be found anywhere else. Yeah, it was like that. Everyone just assumed that I met wife number 2 when she guest starred in a few episodes of season number 2. Such wasn't the case, and considering that not a single living soul had tuned in to see where we did meet, the oversight is justified. A few months before Spin kicked off, I shot an unfunny indie comedy called Good Advice. The coaxing from my agent to do it was the exact opposite of the title. As the start date was approaching, I got word that an actress they wanted had agreed to play one of the roles. When they told me who it was, I couldn't frickin' believe it. A year earlier, my roommate at Promises had been praising this person nearly every day for 6 months. Bill was so obsessed it began to feel like she was in rehab with us. In his fixated mind, the Valley of Worship was carved in her honor. That her was Denise Richards. Denise and I really enjoyed our time on set together, not caring that the film was a dud. As I got to know her, I realized how misinformed and off base I was with my exaggerated preconceptions. She didn't enter the room with the haughty air one might expect from a former Bond girl. Her vibe was more in line with someone who shot the Vogue cover on their lunch break from Hardee's. It was refreshing, it was intoxicating, it was 2 ships passing. I was ready for the big game, but I wasn't ready for Miss America to watch me play. Future tripping or not, I knew the stakes were too high to start something I'd be expected to care about more than the job. I kept it professional, thanked Dee for her contributions to the movie, and told her I hoped to see her again around the campus. It was the right call. For season 1 to have the shot it deserved, I needed to stay upright on the wave of momentum I was riding. In Dee's neck of the woods, she was winding down a long-term relationship that was one set of cufflinks away from its eulogy. It would have been a force fit for both of us. Timing is everything because it has to be. Bill didn't agree. He told me in my timing to get fucked and that I had blown it. The lovely Denise reappeared to join me at the spin party. We were really excited to see each other again. The ease and familiarity we picked back up with was a direct result of the rapport Good Advice had helped us establish. Took a minute, but that indie dog with fleas eventually got us out of the woods and back on the path. Then 9/11 happened. No, not with Denise, the real event. It was a Tuesday. I was on my treadmill in the condo at 5 a.m. before a long day of work on our season premiere. By the time I finished, the North Tower had already been hit. I remember sipping black Folgers as I kept an eye on the scattered updates the networks were trying to piece together. The only info available was that some type of aircraft had struck the tower in the upper floors. I knew from the size of the gaping hole in the side of the building there wasn't a chance it was a private charter. The reports were stuck on a loop until something on the screen caught my attention that didn't belong there. I watched mesmerized as a haunting black shape entered the shot, reminding me of the shark from Jaws. It lumbered into its final bank and disappeared behind the South Tower. 2 seconds later, a catastrophic fireball harpooned the building like a special effect from a Michael Bay film. The world changed instantly and forever in that moment on that day. I called my spin director, Ted W., insisting he turn on the TV before he had a chance to say good morning. We stayed on the phone trying to make sense of the chaos when the impossible happened. The South Tower collapsed. 110 floors free-falling into pyroclastic disintegration as it disappeared into its own footprint. Massive clouds, the likes of which not seen since the volcanic eruption of Mount St. Helens, arose mightily, filling the air and suffocating the city. The words between T-Dub and myself as we stared in horror felt like shapeless echoes floating across the miles of copper wire that enshrined our conversation. I was in a high-rise when it happened, and since no one really had any idea how far this thing reached, I couldn't vacate that fucking condo fast enough. Luckily, there weren't any homemade booby traps to stumble through. By then, my unit had become a certified heel-free zone. I took the small wins where I could get them. The following day, we all gathered at the studio, not for work, but for each other. It was like group therapy on the stage, discussing that level of reality, surrounded by all things fake. Michael Boatman and I watched solemnly as two guys from the art department removed the Twin Towers from our main backdrop. The day before, they were proudly lit and displayed. 24 hours later, they had to disappear them. That one hit both of us hard. Gary joined the group with his best gipper in tow. Summoning Rockney or MacArthur, he reminded us that we were a New York-themed show and the city needed us to own that. In the face of all the suffering, he wanted humor to be our message of unity. When he finished speaking, I wanted to blow off City Hall and go take the oath for the few and the proud. If we couldn't be there in body, we could sure as hell do so in spirit. Tuesdays at 9 p.m. on ABC. A couple days later, we were back in action, trying to do comedy while the whole country was crying. Chapter 42. Rallying behind Gary's marching orders, we elevated the on-set camaraderie throughout every department. The network was thrilled with our clockwork delivery of every episode, on schedule and budget. Combined with the level of creative quality our storylines maintained, we had their full support on all fronts. It would have been easy to fold up our tent in the middle of the chaos and ask for a few weeks off, an option never even discussed. By Thursday the 13th, we were plowing through the grief and fear to make sure our version of City Hall continued to serve the people. Denise playing my love interest was a key element to those storylines. She did a great job as the sexy spy from the rival mayoral campaign, and the more time we spent on set together, the more challenging it became to hide our unchaste chemistry. We knew but didn't care how thoroughly we'd trample the line that separates the person from the character. Let's not forget, my curiosity roots with D-Nice could be traced all the way back to Promises. Anyone who spent that much time imagining the banquet would ultimately have to make a choice when it finally manifested. Be a moron and fucking starve, or sit the hell down and eat. Perfectly in line with how sobriety had irkled my cool factor, our first date was baseball-themed and took place at my condo. It was October 4th, and Barry Bonds had the world's attention as he sat one home run shy of tying Mark McGwire's single-season record of 70. I carefully explained to Dee that if we were at a restaurant unable to watch, the main thing on my mind would be the game, the main thing I could say out loud. She completely understood and loved the idea of joining me to celebrate my passion for baseball. We ate our zone meals from plastic bowls and hung on every pitch when Bonds was at the plate. He was 0 for 1 with 3 walks, but Denise stayed enthusiastic as the game crossed the 3-hour mark, setting the stage for Bonds' final at-bat in the 9th. My last chance to go from zero to hero. On the 3rd pitch, we lost our shit when Barry cranked a moonshot that landed 20 rows deep into the upper deck at Enron Field. As soon as he connected, it was a great sign when Denise yelled louder than I did. It was a yell that vindicated my risky, dorky date plan. As we were saying goodnight at the elevator, Dee grabbed my face and pulled me into a long, passionate kiss. The baseball gods had sprinkled some magic on our night. I was no longer thinking about the game. A week after home run number 70, Dee spent the night. 2 weeks after that, we enjoyed a lovely week in Hawaii at the Hanalana Kapana. 2 months later, with my billabong still reeking of coconut oil, I took a knee and asked Denise to marry me. You happy now, fucking Bill? Impulsive or otherwise, our dash to the altar wasn't fueled by pink cloud infatuation or a runaway fantasy that ran out of gas. I was 3.5 years sober, and for the first time in years, my feelings were accessible and based in reality. I can declare with certainty that big swirling glob of mysterious elation was the love I had for my favorite Hardee's employee. My motivation to tie the knot wasn't connected to the usual emotional suspects. It was galvanized by the life-changing events of 9/11. A few months before I took that knee, outlandish disasters, the displacement of continuity, and catastrophic upheaval were no longer hyperbolic neurotic figments of doomsday preppers or constructs of nihilistic woo-boos. All of that shit came knocking on America's front door, and when we went to answer, it blew up the whole fucking house. On September 10th, I was fine. By the morning of the 12th, I didn't want to die alone. We announced our engagement and the town gave us a standing O. A month later, I got another one at the Golden Globes when I took home the award for Best Actor in a Comedy Series. During my speech, I played a great joke on Alan Ruck, who was in the hospital at the time with pneumonia. I thanked everyone from the show, and it seemed as though I'd unfairly omitted Ruck. Looking like I was done, I quickly turned back to the mic. "Hey, Alan Ruck, this is for you," as I held the trophy skyward. The following morning in Ruck's hospital room on the other coast, his doctor dropped by with Alan's test results in his hand, paused dramatically at the door, and proclaimed, "Hey, Alan Ruck, these are for you," as he pushed his chart skyward exactly as I'd done with the globe. Alan would tell me later it was one of his favorite moments ever. Emmys and balloon shrivel? I dig the Ruck stuff a lot more. It still matters to both of us. On April 30th in 2002, the season finale of Spin City aired. The show left everyone on a cliffhanger, and not just for the storylines, but also in the plot of life. We had no official word yet from the network if a third season was in the cards, which would have translated to a seventh season for the show overall. The producers had planned a ritzy rap party on our stage at Radford Studios, which potentially would carry a twofold purpose. If we got picked up for another season, it would have been your basic, have a nice summer, see you in the fall shindig.
Okay, I'm going to sleep. Link is going to be in the live chat or probably the comments. Now, what does this link do? It allows you to stream the full audiobook you were just listening to, The Book of Sheen by Charlie Sheen 2025, or permanently download it. Who else delivers but nirvgorilla? Good night.